All right, welcome back to the TCI studios. We got Alex Dodd, Robert here. We're going to talk about another national topic that's all over the place. This one's been a long time in the works for us, Alex, and we're finally at the point where this week we're going to get some decisions. We've already had some decisions from some states, but the name, image, likeness, NCAA lost a big court case, I think it was last week, been headed this direction. If you're on Twitter, you see all these posts from the players out there basically saying, hey, I'm here if anybody wants to sponsor me or wants me to, use my name, image, likeness to support their product. They're already out there kind of trying to say, hey, my DMs are open, hit me up. Alex, this is a topic where the NCAA hasn't done anything yet. I laugh when people say, oh, well, Congress is going to do something this summer. Anybody that thought Congress was going to do something quick on this I don't know, they've been living in a cave or something.
I will say that the NCAA and Congress are very similar in the ways that they oversee things. So it's a fair comparison.
Yes, and quite frankly, I don't want Congress doing anything because some of the things I've seen coming out of Congress around this topic would just totally ruin college athletics. I think some of these things are going to ruin it as well, but I think what's happening here, Alex, and you've got some details you'll talk about here in a second. States have kind of gone down their own path, and a lot of them have laws. Some of the states have laws coming out next Wednesday, whatever July 1st is. I think it's Wednesday. Other states like South Carolina have passed laws but said, oh, it won't be effective until July of next year.
Right.
So you've got a big difference already in how the states are handling this.
Right. I mean, even we're sitting here on Monday, and the state of Ohio came out today, and the governor signed an executive order because the bill was held up in the state house with people trying to tack other things onto it. So Ohio announced today that they're going to start on July 1st. Then you've got Alabama, Florida, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Texas, who are all going to start on July 1st. And if you hear the names of those states, it should be very important for Clemson fans because those are a lot of power schools, a lot of schools with deep pockets, deep donor pockets. I mean, just thinking about it, if the NCAA doesn't enact some kind of legislation on Wednesday, what could the donors at Texas do starting on July 1st? Yes. That could be what makes Texas relevant again.
If only we had Nikki Haley, former Clemson alum, still in the state house, maybe she would have come through with an executive order because, South Carolina, we're going to do something, but it's not going to be effective till next year.
Yeah, and the explanation given by the governor and some of the people in the state house when they were in Clemson a few weeks ago to sign the bill was, well, we want other states to work through the problems first so that we can adjust our bill and which sounds great, but when this thing hits the ground running, it's going to create a nightmare in recruiting immediately.
And it's already hitting the ground running. I saw a quarterback for Wisconsin today put a tweet out. He's already got his own little logo and his own little brand.
Yeah.
He's getting that out there. So, next week, those states you talk about are going to be able to, those players that play for teams in those states will be able to start making money. You'll see some of those guys advertising things on their social media platforms for a car dealership or this or that. And, all the state rules are not the same.
Right.
But the gist is all of those folks will be able to start accepting pay to do some kind of advertisement or some way use their name or their image.
Right, and the state of Georgia is in that list as well. So you'll see people at Georgia doing the same thing next week. And there's still a lot of details to hammer out. The state of South Carolina's approach makes sense if you're thinking about it reasonably to delay this and try to figure out how it works. But from the way it's going to play out in college athletics, it doesn't. So they were trying to avoid the problems that some of these states are going to have in the first few weeks of this going on.
Well, they were counting on Congress coming through with something which they should have known better.
Yeah, and the NCAA, the pressure is just ramped up exponentially in the last week now, with the Supreme Court decision, and then Mark Emmert coming out and saying, basically if the council doesn't pass something, the D1 council doesn't pass something this week, I'm going to do my own thing. He basically says he's going to do an executive order. So
something's going to happen before the 1st, and it will probably be, I think it was Dennis Dodd talking about this on Twitter today, shocker, it's going to happen on the 30th.
Right.
NCAA will do something on the 30th, which will allow every school to do this, and what those rules are and what that means. Do they just leave it up to the school? Do they try to set some kind of parameters? But it's coming, and then, as you said, there'll be problems when it first starts,
Right.
and then they'll come through and try to make some more changes to it later on. But as you know, a lot of these things, once you let the cat out of the bag, it's hard to come back and rein it in, just like the transfer portal.
Right, and the NCAA had been working on a plan for a while, and then the Supreme Court case really messed that up for them because they got kind of caught
9-0, I think.
Caught red-handed with what they were trying to do. So now they pretty much had to fuse their original plan with a new plan, and they're going to try to include some sort of unnamed restrictions to allow amateurism to still exist in some capacity, to have college athletics be college athletics. But it's going to be interesting to see how that even plays out.
All right, so I got a hard question for you, Alex. So, Robert, owner of TCI, am I better off spending my money on Alex Dodd, or am I better off spending that money to go get a DJ to advertise for TCI?
Well, that might be one of the restrictions. Hopefully that's a restriction so that I can keep my job. But I will say...
That's a joke, but that's reality.
Yeah.
Starting next Wednesday, cheating is going to be legalized. They're going to try to put some rules around it and some parameters around it. They've had rules around cheating forever, and as we know, some schools, especially some in a certain conference, don't abide by those, and there's a whole lot of cheating out there. And now it's going to be a whole lot easier for people to cheat. I think I saw one of the schools or states said, you couldn't get an athlete to advertise for you if you were a booster.
Right.
Okay. How hard is that to get around?
Yeah, and how strictly is the school going to count a booster? If you give, if you do the traditional IPTE donation of $10 a year, are you a booster? Because there are a lot of people that would be considered boosters by the NCAA's current limitations.
Well, and if you're a company or a business, you might have a booster, but you're going to have a whole lot of non-boosters that work for that company. So you can just say, hey, well, we're doing this as our company. And again, how do you work through all that? Is that going to be allowed? Is that not going to be allowed?
Yep.
Bottom line, in my opinion, cheating is going to be legalized starting next week. And, the NCAA is going to do something, so it's going to be everywhere. It's going to have more of an impact on transfers right now, because all of the guys that are playing this coming season, they're all pretty much on campuses now.
Right.
So you're not going to really gain a recruiting advantage with that. And the good news is, the 2022 class will be the first one coming in with these rules. So that's where I think we'll start to see some of the legalized cheating. You're not supposed to do anything before they get to school.
Right.
Anybody believe that? I don't. So to me, the next few, I'd say 2022, maybe 2023, 2024 recruiting classes. Obviously, Clemson fans, Clemson's had top 3, top 4, top 5 classes pretty consistently now. Obviously, always top 10 classes. Then in 2023, 24, if you still see Clemson getting those top 3, top 4 classes, maybe throwing in a top 1 or 2 here or there, then you feel like, okay, these rules are not really impacting us. If all of a sudden, if you see Clemson's recruiting going from top 4, top 5 to top 10, there's been an impact.
Yeah, there's also a lot of things that are still left to be learned about how this will play out. I guess we'll know more concrete details on Wednesday when the NCAA comes out with their plan. But like you said, they're going to be reviewing it, and they're going to have to iron out some issues, and they're going to have to take a few chips off the block in order to round this thing out as this year goes on. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm not totally against players being able to make a little bit of money, but it seems like in a lot of ways it's going to be kind of chaotic with the way that this is going to work out. I know my dad was a college athlete. He talked about in season, you just don't have time to work. And in order to work when you're in an NCAA, on an NCAA sanctioned team, you have to fill out all this paperwork, and it's a big headache.
Of course, my question would be is if you are a student athlete, with all the things available to you, do you need to work?
Right, which now in this climate, especially when we're talking about football, it doesn't seem like there is a lot of
Well, and now it's not just football, but we saw the stuff that happened with the track team and the lawsuit around the women's, and now they're having to make sure that some of the other sports can come over and use what's in the football facility, and
Yeah.
they get to have the suits to travel with, and all of that stuff. It's to me, it's the perfect storm because you're getting all of this stuff hitting at the same time. The athletic department's going to have to spend more money. We've had conversations with Radakovich about this and some others. They're going to have to spend more money because of what just went down with the lawsuit and all of that stuff to make sure everything's equal. Everybody saw that coming out of the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament. That world has changed now. So all of these things that we've seen in football is going to have to happen with these other sports. My concern, and I know Kelly Gramlich, Will did a story. She came out pretty strongly on this. I think it was last week. About this, just her concern being the non-big revenue sports, the women's basketball and all these other sports. How is this really going to impact them?
Yeah, because you have all of these things, like you said, the perfect storm, everything's happening at once. You're talking about, especially at Clemson, you're talking about having equity between men's and women's athletics and between football and the other non-revenue sports. That's not possible in this climate. Nobody's going to go pay just some swimmer at their school, for example. Clemson doesn't have swimming, so I use that. But nobody's going to pay just some random swimmer to do a commercial for them for their car dealership. There will be a select few athletes that are on those kind of sports teams that maybe are like a superstar. Like maybe some of the women's basketball players that have come through South Carolina could get something like that. Maybe Clemson softball could have something like that. There will be a few across the country that are going to be able to take advantage of this. I mean, that includes college baseball. I mean, how many college baseball players are going to get the opportunity to do something like that? So it is a perfect storm. It's going to...
And even on the same team, it's going to create some friction.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have players on that team that can do it, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of players that think, oh, this is going to be great for me. I'm going to make money now. They aren't really going to make any money, and they're going to be mad. Hey, Alex over here, he's rolling in $20,000 this year in advertisements. I'm getting squat.
Right.
We're on the same team. That doesn't help the team.
And you literally are going to have players on the same team competing for advertisements.
Yes.
Like when you go to the field now under this system, where as much as they say it's not pay for play, it cannot be overlooked that your performance on the field matters towards whether or not this is going to be important to you. Now there are going to be some players like you mentioned some. People that are talking about their YouTube channel and things like that have other things to offer, and our college athletes that are going to be able to benefit from this. But your performance on the field is going to be the number one indicator of whether or not you get to take advantage of this. And you're going to have players who are going to the field with the mindset of, I got to go make my money. I've got to get my bag. So I need to go and perform on the field so I can get these advertisements instead of I need to perform on the field.
And that transfer portal,
to win.
guess what? This is going to make that transfer portal even more popular.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to go, oh, they hear all these promises coming into school, and they get there and they're not real happy, and they're like, oh man, I can go over here. And
yeah,
these guys
look at this marketing agency.
Ohio State's doing all this stuff, and all these players are making all this money, and it's going to make things worse. And again, it's a tough topic because, as you said, Alex, the players ought to be able to make something off their name, image, and likeness. The difficult part is putting the right rules in place to prevent the cheating, which we've talked a lot about, and just to make sure you don't hurt the other sports, the other Olympic sports and the other sports, and at the same time they're having to put more money into those. So I don't think it's a coincidence. We did a video earlier on the 12-team playoff. More money. Guess what? With all of this stuff happening, these schools are going to need more money to make everybody happy. So even though the money's not coming from the schools, it's coming from the advertisers, all of these other things happening at the same time, it's going to be challenging. Clemson's already announced they're adding 2 more women's sports. Women's lacrosse, women's gymnastics, more money coming out of the athletic department, more people that need the same things that the football team gets. Right. So it's going to be challenging times for athletic directors, for head coaches to try to keep that team chemistry going, and to figure out kind of how to handle the quote-unquote cheating that's going to be going on.
Yeah, and you had several weeks ago when the state of Georgia signed their law and people started picking through it to see what it looked like. There was an incentive for universities where they could take a
Clawback.
kickback from the players. And, you know, as ridiculous as it sounds and as frustrated as people got on social media, the schools are going to be paying for this stuff.
Well,
so in all honesty,
the intent of the clawback, my understanding, and you may have read more than I did, was to help with one of those problems we're talking about, to try to make it equitable for those other sports.
Right. And yeah, it's supposed to help with equity for other sports. Also, in order for the university to be able to do all these things, it has to be funded somehow. And unless you've got, you know, thousands of boosters that are hiding out in the woods, you're not going to be able to fund all this.
Well,
how are schools going to be able to afford this?
That's the challenge if you are Clemson. You don't have a huge alumni
the marketing
base.
aspect, not the paying the players, because that's not the school that's doing that,
Right.
but the helping your players with branding and that kind of thing.
But the pay, and I think Clemson does a great job of branding, and they've already done some of that in the last year, and you've seen some of the players trying to take advantage of that. My big concern around this whole thing is you'll have schools with much bigger alumni bases, which means you have a lot more alumni out there that own businesses. So you may have an Ohio State or Notre Dame, these schools with huge alumni bases, where they may be able to pay the fourth receiver on the team to advertise for them. And you may have a smaller alumni base like Clemson, where they may not have the same amount of businesses in the area and stuff willing to step up to say, hey, I'm going to give that number 4 receiver something, so they'll come to Clemson and be happy at Clemson versus going to Ohio State, Notre Dame, one of the schools with larger alumni bases.
Right. So the jury's still out. We still got to see what the NCAA is going to do, what restrictions or prohibitions they're going to put around this thing to really insulate the athlete. I mean, there needs to be protection for the student athletes in this, because we see how many players have successful college careers and go to the NFL and find themselves in a lot of trouble because they're making money. And there needs to be protection, education, and all these things to help players out in this process, instead of just throwing them out there and letting them field requests for ads from businesses, because that's a lot of pressure to put on an 18 or 22-year-old.
My last comment on this, and then we'll wrap this one, is for Clemson and for Dabo. Dabo's always paid a lot of attention to the character of the players he's recruiting. That's going to be even more important in this new world. So a lot of challenges here, a lot more to discuss here. We're going to find out a lot more here in the next 7 days, but thought we'd give you some thoughts on that. Thank you for listening to us on TCI, and stay tuned to TCI for the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics, Clemson recruiting, and Clemson football.